knowledge. Since 1978, Dave Ellis has worked to discover the tools, techniques, skills, and resources useful when becoming a master student. The result of this work is Becoming a Master Student, the best-selling student success textbook now being used in over 1,100 colleges and universities throughout the United States and Canada. This videotape is one of a series designed to promote students to be successful in school. It includes excerpts of a student success workshop conducted by Dave Ellis.
To start, I want to go for the gold. I want to present to you the idea that students report to me is the very best idea that I have to share. Now, as I mentioned, I'm a little leery to tell you of my very best idea right off the bat. Because if I tell you my best idea and you yawn, or you think, oh, that's not much of an idea, well, I've kind of lost credibility. But nevertheless, it's the truth that students report over and over again that this idea is by far the most useful. It's the most useful idea, so we call it success tool number 1. And it can be used in applications that are specific to school or outside of school. Although most of the course is about nuts and bolts, concrete strategies for being successful in the classroom and in school, this tool can be used beyond that. But I want to talk about it in a way that lets you know that you can use it to take more effective notes, to improve your memory. Absolutely dynamite tool to improve your memory, to improve the way in which you communicate with the instructor, to improve how you take tests, to improve how you read a book. Have you ever had that experience of picking up a textbook and you'll be reading along and you'll read a paragraph and then you'll read another paragraph and you don't have any idea what you just read? I mean, no idea at all. You know you read it because your eyes moved down it, but you don't have any concept of what it was. This is a tool that will be useful, extremely useful in that regard. So it's a versatile kind of an idea, of a strategy, of a technique that you can use. This, by the way, is not something that I came up with. I didn't invent this tool, although I don't think you've heard about it before. I'll bet that you don't know about it and you don't do it. But I don't want to take credit for it because it's actually recommended by people all over the world. This is a technique that's recommended by researchers and scientists. There was a book out, as a matter of fact, a few years ago called Type A Behavior. And it was a best-selling book. And in that book, those scientists were talking about heart problems and what causes heart problems. And essentially what they were recommending is this tool. The concept, by the way, is something that, no, I'm not building this up. I'm not building this up and building it up and then tell you something that doesn't work. It is marvelously effective. And in the personal area, too, I mentioned in school about note-taking and staying awake in a boring lecture. Marvelous technique for staying awake in a boring lecture. And all those study skills in reading and preparing for I mentioned that, but also it's useful in your personal life. And no kidding, you can have more fun partying and having fun when you apply this tool. Extremely useful tool. Not easy to implement, but something that I can explain to you in a flash that you can implement. I'd like you to, somebody's suggestion was to suspend judgment. Just suspend judgment for a minute. Listen to the concept and let me explain it before you decide if you can do it, because I say that nobody in here can do this. That you now don't do this. This very best suggestion that I have, you don't now do it. The suggestion is this. Now what I mean is to do what you're doing when you're doing it. Yeah, it's to do what you're doing when you're doing it. And to be where you are when you're there. To do what you're doing when you're doing it. And to be where you are when you're there. Do you know what I mean? You look kind of confused. You know what I mean? Do you know people that aren't here now? Like some of you right now? I mean, just check to see where you are right now. Some people went like this. No, I don't mean your body. I'm not talking about something mystical here. I'm talking about very concrete. Where are you now? Where's your awareness right now? What's that little voice that's in your head chatting about right now. And what I think is that most of the time it's not here now. Most of the time it's thinking about yesterday or tomorrow or next week or last week or 10 minutes ago, like, well, if she wouldn't have said, and then I could have said, and then she would have said, and I should have said. Or, well, I think I'll say, and then she'll say, and then I might say. It's up here in the future, your thoughts. It's futurizing, or it's back in the back, pasteurizing. It's pasture, yeah. It's one way or the other, and it's very seldom here. That little voice. Do you know the little voice I'm talking about? The little voice in your head is what I want you to listen to. Not your conscience now. I don't mean the voice that tells you right from wrong. I mean the little voice that's always chatting. That's what I want to ask you to listen to. And I'm going to time you. And I'll say go, and start listening to your little voice, and then I'll say stop and stop. Just listen to that little voice for those 10 seconds, all right? All right, good. Here we go. Ready? Go. Stop. Stop. Did you hear it? Yeah. Some of your little voices said, this is kind of dumb. I don't know. Some of your little voices said, 10 seconds is a long time. My little voice said, I have a digital watch. I don't know what your little voice is. It's sometimes totally inane what your little voice is. Some of your little voices said, I wonder when 10 seconds is going to be up. Some of your little voices said, what little voice? That's the little voice. And my claim is that that's usually not here and now. It's usually talking about something that's totally unrelated to whatever you're doing in the moment. And that the tool for success is to train yourself, which you can do. And you can start having dramatic results quickly, to bring your voice back to now, to bring your awareness back to now, to bring your consciousness back to right now. And it's not easy. It's something that you need to practice all the time. And I still claim, even after I've explained this to you, that you can't do it now. And that it takes a lot of practice. And that if you practice it even tonight, even in this time, if you practiced it, you'd be remarkably different tomorrow by just practicing it a few hours. Now, I know that's kind of a big claim, and I'm not kidding. Now, here's how. Before I talk about how to apply this technique, I want to first acknowledge that staying focused when watching television is not easy. Our habit, actually, is to drift. While being in front of a television, our habit is to not be on the edge of our chair, because, in part, we don't have much at risk. When we watch television, we watch it with very little at stake. One way that you can practice the technique of staying focused is to be aware of what it is that you have at stake. What's at risk in this particular situation? What do you have to gain and what do you have to lose? I suggest that when you're in a classroom, you've got a lot of money at risk. You've spent, directly or indirectly, a great deal of money to be in that classroom. Maybe even as much as $32 or more per hour to be in that classroom to learn something, or even to watch a videotape in the classroom. That's part of what's at risk. Now, in addition to money, there's also maybe your financial, your economic, your educational future that's at risk while you're in a classroom. It's really what you learn. So as you watch this videotape, what you can do is notice what you have at risk, and then while you're listening to the technique of being here now, you can actually apply the technique of being here now. Maybe you know that you're not here very often. Like when you're doing what you're doing when you're doing it, being where you are when you're there, you sort of know that you're not, and not sure what to do about it. So here's how. What you do is you be aware of your awareness. You take a little bit of your awareness and be aware of where your awareness is. I'm not talking double talk. Just pay attention here. And I'm not talking mystical. I don't mean out of the body travel. I'm not that spiritual in the ethosphere or whatever. I don't even know about all that. I'm talking about concrete physical awareness, and be aware of your awareness. Or another way to say it is to be conscious of your consciousness. To attend to your attention. Just pay attention to your attention. Be aware of your awareness. Pay conscious of your consciousness. And see where you are. Now, if you're like me, and everybody I've ever talked to, ever, when you be aware of your awareness, you'll notice that you're not here very often. That you're off thinking of something else. So the technique is to gently pull yourself back to now. What'll happen is that you'll drift off. And then it's just you gently bring yourself back to now. And then as you be aware of your awareness, what you'll notice is that you drifted off again. And you just gently bring yourself back to now. And then what you'll notice is that you drifted off again. Now it's going to get frustrating because you're going to notice that you're hardly ever here. That you're gone far more than you're here. I'll bet. Now if you don't notice this, please come and tell me. Or write to me if you can't come and tell me. Because I'll bet that what you'll notice is that you're hardly ever here. No wonder you don't remember people's names. They come up. You've ever had that experience? Somebody will come up and say, "Hi, my name's Dave." And you'll say, "Oh, well, hi, I'm Pat." And then you'll wonder what that person's name was. And you know they just told you. I claim that you can't remember because you weren't there. Really. You were thinking about what your name was. And it'll drift off again, and you gently bring it back to now. And it'll drift off, and you gently bring it back. Those Indian gurus that I was telling you about that sit on the mountaintops, they say you can't even do it for 3 seconds. It's a challenge. Now, what you need to know is that your mind has a mind of its own. And when you bring it back, it'll go away again. And you need to be gentle. Don't force it. It won't work. Your mind drifts away, and you gently bring it back to now. And then it'll drift away, you just gently bring it back to now. Don't fight with it. Have you ever, because it won't work, have you ever told yourself you weren't going to think of something? Maybe you go to bed at night, and you got something that's troubling you, and so you go to bed and you say, "I'm not going to think about it tonight." Well, what happens? Yeah, sure, you think about it all night long. Or like right now, if you think you're so good at controlling your mind, right now, don't think of pink elephants. Don't think of them right now. For 5 seconds, don't think about pink elephants. Yeah, your mind has a mind of its own. So the technique is to be aware of your awareness, be conscious of your consciousness, and gently bring it back to now. And it's that simple. See, it's not easy, but it's simple. And you can practice it. If you practice it for just a few hours, it'll be remarkable what'll happen. I know, because I did it. I just cut my work time dramatically.
This technique is one that you can use in many areas of your life as a student. You can use it to improve your memory by staying focused the first time that you hear something, so that you actually embed that information. Oftentimes, memory is not a problem. With recall, it's a problem that you never put that information in your head in the first place. By being here now, you can actually improve your memory. It's also a great technique for improving your note-taking and listening to sometimes what you might think of as boring lectures. Because lecturers, generally, their content is interesting. And if you stay focused, if you keep your attention focused on the content, then that will improve your ability to be present in that lecture. This is also a technique that you can use, staying focused in improving relationships, so that your relationship with your spouse, your child, your parents, even your friends will improve dramatically when you're focused, when you're there. Like any powerful technique, you want to use care when applying this tool. Please listen.
I have some cautions about Be Here Now. And I want to share those cautions, and then I want to talk to you about it. I want to talk to you about this concept, because if you haven't guessed, I'm sort of enthusiastic about it. I think it works. And the cautions I have are three. And the first caution is that I don't mean don't daydream. If you heard me say don't daydream, you didn't hear me right. Because I didn't say it and I don't mean it. Daydreaming is wonderful. A lot of the last chapter of this book is about effectively daydreaming. We call it visualizations and affirmations. And daydreaming is wonderful, so don't hear me say you don't do it. It's just that if you do it, do what you're doing when you're doing it. And be where you are when you're there. So let's say, for example, that you're in a classroom, maybe even this classroom, some of you in the cheap seats, and you don't really want to be in the class. I mean, maybe you found your body here, but you don't really want to be here. Daydream. Daydream about something that you want to do. Daydream about some success that you're going to have. Daydream about how you want to get something to go together. Now, what the problem is every once in a while, the teacher, maybe me, I'll be too loud. I'll say something really loudly, and it'll interrupt your daydream. Just gently bring yourself back to your daydream. And then somebody will kind of giggle or something, and it'll interrupt your daydream. Just gently bring yourself back to your daydream. The point is, when you daydream, daydream. When you do anything, do what you're doing. That's the first caution. Daydreaming is fine. Don't think I said don't daydream. Second caution. Some people hear me say, live for today. And I'm not saying that. Some people misinterpret what I'm saying. Some people misinterpret this, be here now. And what they think I'm saying is that old ideal of the hippies of the 1960s, of live for right now, forget about the future, and it may never come anyway, and just live for right now. And I'm not saying that. If you heard me say that, you didn't hear me accurately, because that's not what I believe. As a matter of fact, I think that that's absolutely counter. That philosophy of live for today and forget about tomorrow, it may never come, that's counter to this. You can't do this if you have that. If you just live for today, you can't be here now. Because to effectively be in the moment, to effectively be right now with a person or with your job or with your textbook or with your note-taking or with your instructor, to effectively be right now, you need to have a plan about tomorrow. You need to know what it is that you're going to do tomorrow, the next day, and maybe next year. Otherwise, without the plan, your mind just keeps racing ahead and racing ahead to wonder, well, I wonder what I'm going to do next. So it's not live for today. It includes planning. And when you plan, just plan. Be here now with your plan. Sit down, take out a piece of paper, and write down your plan. The last caution is that this can be frustrating when you discover how little you're here. It can be frustrating for a few moments, or maybe even for a day or two, when you really get to the realization of how often you're not in the moment, how often your awareness is not where you are. And so the caution is, don't get frustrated.
Those are the cautions. I know that we can improve with practice. Even in 2 weeks, dramatic changes can occur when you experiment with being here now. The point is to be right now. Right now. Now.
Your ideas are important. Successful students aren't always the most intelligent or the most talented. They are the ones that take advantage of every opportunity to develop a competitive edge. Since 1978, Dave Ellis has worked to discover the tools, techniques, skills, and resources useful when becoming a master student. The result of this work is Becoming a Master Student, the best-selling student success textbook now being used in over 1,100 colleges and universities throughout the United States and Canada. This videotape is one of a series designed to promote students to be successful in school. It includes excerpts of a student success workshop conducted by Dave Ellis.
Sometimes we have something that we don't want. And I just want to represent it with this. This is like, and you might think of your own, because each of you have probably something in your life that you just as soon not have there, that you might even call a problem. that you'd like to get rid of. It kind of gets in your way and it's distracting for people. People come up to talk to you and maybe that's all you see when they're talking to you, or maybe that's what they see too. And it's one of these things. And, so think of something like that you can, if you don't have one of these, because not a lot of people have one that's just like this, but if you don't have one of these, just think for a minute right now of something that you have that you just soon not have.
I want to interrupt the tape right here and ask that you look into your own life for barriers, something that you've been trying to change, maybe something that you've just been putting up with, obstacles in your life that you could apply this technique to. I'm asking that you do that as you watch the videotape, that you look for barriers, obstacles, what you've been putting up with, what you've been trying to change in your own life, and apply these techniques to that problem.
Now, what I want to talk about right now are 3 methods of how to deal with one of these things that you don't like, but you have. And 2 of the methods, I say, don't work very well. And 1 of the methods, I think, works very well. And I'll give you all 3 of the methods, and you then go out in the world and test them out and see. I want to say that one way to handle one of these things is to turn your back on it, which is a little hard to do sometimes, but you turn your back on it, and then you put on a happy face, and you pretend it's not there. It looks like this. Oh, right, hello. Wonderful day, isn't it? Wonderful day. Nothing, yeah, it's a great day. Yeah, nothing's wrong. My life is perfect. It's wonderful. No problems in my life. But something's wrong when people do that.
What I'm looking for now are examples in your life of when you've had a problem or a barrier, and what you've done is ignored it or pretended it wasn't there.
I have a problem when I go back home to visit my relatives with speaking. I don't speak like I'm black. I don't speak like I'm from New York.
And how have you handled it?
In the beginning, I ignored it, but then every time we go home for family reunions, it seems to be a problem and causes a lot of controversy.
Sometimes I pretend that I know what someone else is talking about, even if I really don't, because I don't want to appear stupid.
Huh. And how have you dealt with that?
Well, for a long time, I just ignored that I was doing it. I just played along. It's worked okay to pretend that it's not there, because I can usually fool people into thinking that I do know what's going on. But it hasn't worked for me, because I don't feel comfortable with it.
A problem I've had that I just ignore is communicating honestly with people. Sometimes I want them to like me, I want to look good, and so I say the right things instead of what I'm genuinely feeling.
Does ignoring that problem work?
It used to work because my goal was to look good and be nice, and now my goal is to feel good about myself, and it's not working.
Second technique for how to deal with one of these things that you've got that you don't like is it's like this. Oh, just hate you. I just really don't want you at all in my life, and I don't like that at all, and I'm going to get rid of it. I just don't like it anymore. It's called willpower, fighting, resisting it. It's like, and I claim that this is what happens. That when you fight it, see what happened? What happened? Yeah, it got a lot worse. And then what happens when it gets a little worse? You say, well, now you're really in trouble. Because I mean, just... And it's a little silly, of course. And it stays there. It always stays there for me. When I fight it, it's like anything you resist. Do you know about resistance? How when you resist something, what happens? Here, let's do an experiment. I need a volunteer. Chad, would you volunteer? Oh, good. Just come up here, would you? I want to demonstrate what happens in this second technique. And the way I want to do this is just push your hands up against mine and push on my hands, okay? Push on my hands. Okay, very good. Just a minute. Now, no, just watch now, because this is the lesson. Do it one more time. Push on my hands. Okay. Push. Okay, just a minute. Okay. Do it one more time. Now just push on my hands. Now, here, just put your hands up there now. Now push. No, one more time, just push. Okay, good, that's all. Thanks, appreciate it. Did you see what happened? What happened when I pushed real hard and resisted and fought him? What did he do? Yeah, he pushed harder. And I pushed harder. And he pushed even harder. Then he hurt my hand, hurt my arm, I mean. Now, on the other hand, what happened when I just didn't resist? Yeah, he just about fell over. He just kind of lost his balance, and he quit pushing. Every time I quit resisting, he quit pushing. What I claim is that resistance causes persistence. What you fight gets bigger. When you got that thing, you don't like it, you try and fight it, it gets bigger.
Once again, I'm looking for your examples. When in your life have you had a problem? What problem have you struggled against? Have you fought? Have you resisted?
A problem that I've had in the past is being able to speak in front of people, or even to walk in front of people, that I've always been very nervous about that. And what hasn't worked is that the more I resist it, the more it's there, the worse it gets for me.
I'm a survivor of an eating disorder, and for a few years I just struggled with it and tried to fix it and resisted it and put myself down, and it didn't work. It was blown up and occupied my conscious thoughts almost 24 hours a day.
One thing that I've really struggled with is trying to get up early in the morning. I'm a late night person, and so I've tried everything to try to get myself up early in the morning, and nothing works. The harder I try, the worse it gets.
Well, so maybe we've got two techniques that don't work very well. One's called ignoring it, turning the other way, whistling a happy tune, pretending it's not there. The other one's called resisting it, willpower, struggling against it. And the third suggestion I have is to love it. Is to love it to death. Is to just love your problems. Experience your barriers, totally. Love your problems. Looks like this. Oh, I see. Well, I've got one of these. It's moves a lot. It's kind of ugly. It's slimy. It's green. It's noisy, or whatever it is. You just describe it. You look at it. You don't ignore it. You just tell the truth about it, and you love it and say, yeah, and I know I've got you, and some days I just as soon not have you, but I'm just going to accept it, just love the fact that's part of me. And that's what I think happens. It'll come back, though, because problems have a way of resurfacing, and then you just look at it again, and you describe it in detail, and you love it, and you allow it to be there. The suggestion, then, is to love your problems. Accept your problems. Allow your problems to be there. Don't struggle against them. Don't fight them, and don't ignore them. Just love them and experience them totally. Allow them to be there. Some people have a problem with fat. Some people don't have enough of it, and some people have too much of it. And in their own mind. And they struggle against it all the time. They're just forever. You know, some people who are ever on a diet, and it doesn't seem to change the way they look. Or even with that person that you're not quite sure, you just as soon not have, is you just experience them. You describe them, you look at them, you don't ignore them, you just be with them. And I claim that they're going to start disappearing. Now, that person may not actually disappear, but in your mind, their influence will disappear. Their part of you that's a problem will disappear. As long as you love it to death. Just totally experience it. Allow it. Accept it. Describe it. Look at it. One of the techniques that you can use this on is fear. Some of you might be afraid of getting up in front of a group and speaking. And you could even try this today if you wanted to. I know that a few of you wrote on your evaluations that you were really afraid of standing up in this room, particularly with these cameras here, and speaking, that it was just terrifying. A couple of you mentioned that. And one of the ways to deal with that is exactly this, is to love your problem, experience your barrier. And the way you do it is you'd stand up, and rather than standing up and acting cool, like you're not afraid, you can always tell if somebody's afraid because they got white knuckles. Now, maybe the alternative is to love your problem. It's to stand up and say, boy, I'm scared to death to stand up here. You just tell the truth. You just experience it. You don't ignore it. And what I claim happens that if you do that, it disappears. You will love your problem to death. There's a way in which you can practice this, loving everything unconditionally, including yourself. That's really what we're talking about, is loving everything, unconditionally, including yourself. Maybe especially yourself. Loving everything unconditionally, especially yourself. There's a way to practice this. And I'll tell you about how to practice it, but first of all, I want to explain to you that I don't mean that you don't get to change things. It's all right to work to change things. Let's say that weight is the problem, because I already used that analogy. And maybe you have not enough weight on your bones. Or maybe you have too much, whatever you have. You probably have just right, by the way, but you might have a thought that you have too much or too little. And maybe for some of you, you really do have too much or too little. And the first step would be to love it, unconditionally, especially yourself. Now, once you've loved it, and you're just okay with how much is here, then you can work. It's not even work then. Then you can choose to change it. Once you've been able to accept it, totally love it, unconditionally, then you can work to change it. But I think that before you can love it unconditionally, before you do love it unconditionally, you're not changing it. You're fighting it, you're resisting it, and it won't work until you love it unconditionally. So I mentioned just a few seconds ago that there's a way in which you can practice this technique of loving everything unconditionally, especially yourself. The way to do that is you look around in your life for things that you don't really like, that you really don't love yet unconditionally. You just look all around in your life. Just all around until you find something. All right. And then you can get kind of excited about it because you're practicing this new tool of loving everything unconditionally, especially yourself. So you find this thing that's just, ugh. I mean, it's ugly for you. And so you pick it up, or maybe you don't even want to pick it up. Maybe you just want to, like, hook it or something, because it's not really anything you'd ever want to touch. And you pick it up, and you examine it. Then you examine it some more. Oh. And then pretty soon as you examine it some more, it's not, for some reason, it quits being quite so ugly. It quits being quite so repulsive. You might even be able to do that. You might start being able to even touch it and examine it. Not so bad. Pretty bad. The more I smell it, the worse it doesn't smell as bad. Because that's the truth. And then there might be a smell, or might be something you look, or might be the feel of it. That's the technique. You just keep examining it and loving it until all of a sudden, it's disappeared for you. Now, it doesn't mean it's not there. It doesn't mean if you look at it. I mean, it's disappeared in the sense that it's no longer a problem. It's no longer something that you don't like. So then, the way to practice the technique is to look around for something else.
What I suggest is that now you can apply this technique. That the technique, if you just listen to it, might not have much of an effect. But it will have an effect if you actually put it into practice in your own life. The way to do that is through discovery and intention statements. So actually what I'm asking you to do right now is to write down what you discovered about yourself as you listen to this technique. So please write, I discovered that I, and complete this several times. I discovered that I, and then fill in the blanks.
I discovered that I am not my problems. So therefore, my self-worth doesn't depend on whether I have a problem or not.
Great.
I also discovered that I can love my problems because love is not just a feeling, but it's a commitment, it's a choice. And so even if I don't like something, I can choose to love it.
I also discovered that, that I could apply this to almost any problem that came up, that I could look to see if I was resisting it or loving it or what I was doing with it, with any problem that I have.
I discovered that I feel homesick most of the time, although I really doesn't care. I tell myself, to be really control myself, try to be alone to myself, and try to make friends over here.
I discovered that when a problem comes into my life, I have a choice. I can ignore it, I can try to fix it, or I can accept and love it.
I discovered that I don't have to struggle so much to solve my problems. Through this technique, it makes it easier for me to solve my problems without having to worry about it and without having to get stressed out about my problems. I could take them as they come.
If you're watching this on videotape, I recommend that you turn off the tape now for a few moments while you write down, I discovered that I, and fill in the blank several times as it applies to this technique. The next step is, what will you put into practice? What do you intend to use? What goals will you set that are consistent with this strategy, this way of dealing with problems? So on your paper, please, several times, write down, I intend to, and fill in the blank.
I intend to view other people in a loving and accepting way and not judge them because of their problems.
I intend to accept my nervousness when I speak in front of a group.
I intend to use this technique more in everyday life other than just when I really do have a big major problem, because then maybe your problems won't develop and they won't be as bad.
I intend to befriend problems and get the lesson that they bring to me. I found that my willingness to experience all aspects of that eating disorder in my life helped relieve the guilt and the self-hatred and all the shoulds, and therefore the problem lost a lot of power by being able to accept it and love it.
Once again, if you're watching this on videotape, I recommend that you turn off the tape for a few moments while you repeatedly write, I intend to, and then complete with how you will put this into use.
What's important here is to remember that this is just a tool. I don't believe this stuff, and I'm not asking you to believe it. It's a tool. You take it out, you use it. If it works, you use it some more. If it doesn't work, put it on a shelf and don't use it anymore until, oh, you remember. Hey, I remember that tool. You take it off the shelf and you use it again. Except it didn't work in that application. No problem. Put it back on the shelf. Take off a different tool. Use it. That's the point of this whole thing.
Your ideas are important to us. College Survival Incorporated did not make becoming a Successful students aren't always the most intelligent or the most talented. They are the ones that take advantage of every opportunity to develop a competitive edge. Since 1978, Dave Ellis has worked to discover the tools, techniques, skills, and resources useful when becoming a master student. The result of this work is Becoming a Master Student, the best-selling student success textbook now being used in over 1,100 colleges and universities throughout the United States and Canada. This videotape is one of a series designed to promote students to be successful in school. It includes excerpts of a student success workshop conducted by Dave Ellis.
I want to start today by presenting what I consider to be the most powerful process in our textbook. This very powerful process, this very powerful way of being, what I claim is that this is the most powerful. This is the one that you can use particularly in times of trouble. Actually, you can use it all the time, but particularly when things aren't going very well. You can use this process, this technique, this tool. So what I want to start with immediately, because I wanted to give you, as I promised last week, the gold right away. I want to give you the first thing of each class, what's almost most important in each class, sometimes what's most important in each class.
That was quite an introduction, and I know that he's not kidding. The concept that Dave's about to present is one that's been incredibly powerful in my life. I've watched my friends use it, I've watched students use it, and it seems to have impacted their success in a significant way. As you listen to this concept, listen to it as a tool, as a technique, something to experiment with, not something to be believed in. That's what I recommend you do with this tool. Experiment with it. Try it in different areas of your life. Keep it for where it works, put it on the shelf when it doesn't. I recommend now that you listen to Dave and you set aside your judgment. Set aside whether it's right or wrong, whether it'll work or won't, whether you should believe it or not. Just listen and see if you can experiment with this in your life.
My suggestion is that you create it all. That's the tool. That's the powerful process. That's the technique that you can use in some situations. That you literally create your experience. That you literally create the life that you see. Now, I'm not exaggerating here when I talk about this. I don't mean, well, that you create most of what happens in your life. I mean that you literally, absolutely create it all, everything. Another way to say this is that you're 100% responsible. As in the creator of it, as in the producer of it. And for some people, and it's kind of somber even in this room, some of you look like, no, it can't be. Maybe your little mind's screaming, the little voice we talked about in your head that's chatting a lot. Maybe it's saying, no, 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 this is ridiculous. Of course that's not so. I don't create it all. I mean, if you had my parents, you'd know that. Or, well, if you had my friend, if you were married to the person if you had my boyfriend, if you had those teachers that... No, I'm suggesting that none of them have anything to do with it. That it's absolutely your creation. Totally. Now, this is terrible news for some people. And this is the pits. This is depressing for some people. If you and you might want to, like, you might be holding this outside yourself. Say, well, okay, well, when's he going to soften it a little bit? But I ask that you kind of let the concept in. Imagine that I'm not kidding at all, because I'm not, and imagine that it's true for you. Just pretend that what I'm saying is absolutely the truth. That in fact, you do totally create your life. And then think about now some things in your life that you're not wild about that you created. You can do that right now. You can do that right now. So you're doing that? That's sort of the participation here. Now, this becomes depressing particularly for people who are at times, victims of life. You know, victims like the soap opera queens, the people that you see on soap operas, the people, you know people like that? It's just that no matter what is going on in life, they know they didn't have anything to do with it. They're just helpless victims. You know people like that, like maybe you sometimes? It's the screwies of life. It's the ones who are always, it's always done to them. The people that they got here, but they had no idea how they got here. They're like, whose feet brought me here? This is, that kind of bend a knee is the opposite from what I'm talking about. It's the powerless process. Probably the most powerless process. And on the flip chart of this, if I could flip over, like on the back side of being powerful and being not so powerful, it's the victim of life. The person who knows that life's done to him, done to her. And what I'm saying is that most of us, that all of us in this room, often in our life, stand here. And what I'm asking is that you take a leap, that you just, when things aren't going so well, and even when things are, that you just leap and you move from here to here, and you stand here, and you use this tool. And you may say, well, it's not really true. Well, I'm not asking if it's true or not. I'm saying what's useful. Let me give you an example. Let's say that this is a test. This is like, just a test. And you get it back, and on the test, there's an F. Now, sometimes I think we get it back standing here. And it looks like this. Oh, no. Oh, no, an F. Oh, no. Oh, golly, I got an F. Well, you'd get an F too if you had my teacher. My teacher, she just doesn't know how to teach, that's all. I mean, of course I got an F. Have you ever seen the textbook for this class? I mean, maybe the person who wrote it knew how to write, but she sure couldn't explain it. Or, got an F. Now, I'm an older student, got kids. My kids, that's what happened. They run around the dining room table when I'm trying to study, constantly. Or my little sister, of course I got an F. My friends, they made me go out and get drunk. That's what I claim happens more often than not. So what I'm suggesting is when in times of trouble, when you get that F, stand over here. Just stand here, even though you don't maybe believe it. And say, and then you do this. You go, oh no, an F. Oh no. By the way, you can always tell people that get a lot of Fs, they have flat foreheads. Oh no. Oh no. Oh. I see I chose an F. I created an F. Well, I must have. I got one. Let's see. How did I do that? That's the key right there. It's when you get yourself to the point, ingrained in this enough, so you can honestly step back and ask the question, how did I do that? And what I claim is that when you get to that point, when you get to the point when you've stood over here and you honestly enough that you've allowed this to soak in, and you get to the question, okay, I created it, how did I do it? What will happen is the whole series of answers will float up for you. Just a whole series of answers to this question will come up. when you start brainstorming, when you start listing into that question, how did I do that? And that's my request. In those times of troubles, when you're sure that it's not you, when you're sure that you didn't have anything to do with it, stand over there to the point where you get to how did I do that, and then see the role you play in it. And I'll bet that almost always the tool will be effective.
You created all as a powerful tool. And like many powerful tools, it's often misunderstood and misused. Sometimes when people hear this tool for the first time, they say, "Oh, I understand, it's my fault. I'm to blame." No, that's not it. Guilt, blame, shame, all exist in the world of victim. Dave's also not saying that you are the creator of all of your circumstances. Sometimes things just happen. And we get to choose how we respond to our circumstances. Now Dave's going to take another tact with students. Even though you created all can't be proved, there is evidence to suggest that how we experience our world, how we perceive our circumstances, and how we choose to react to them is under our control.
What I'm doing now is proving that you created all, for those skeptics in the room. Some of you are a little skeptical, maybe. On this half of the board is where my proof's going. First of all, I'm going to draw you. That's you. This is the actual you in your skin. This is like your bag of skin. So I don't mean the spiritual you. I'm talking about just everything that's inside your skin is in here, and everything that's outside your skin is out here. Okay? Now, out here, what I'm claiming is there's everything you've ever wanted. There's no scarcity at all. This is the universe. This is the world. This is the community here. This is the school. And out here, all these little dots represent what's out here. And out here is everything that you've ever imagined possible. It's like all the love that you've ever thought you might want is out here. All the companionship, you know, that one person, that sort of special person that you maybe haven't found yet, out here. Money? Oh, tell you, there's no shortage of money out here. There's just money, just zillions, billions, zillions and zillions of money out here. It's just, it's filled up. And there's joy to be had, and there's fun, and there's plenty of stuff to do, and there's cars, and there's houses, and there's people. There's no shortage in the universe. It's all out there. Now, you don't see it all, right? You only see part of it. And that's good, because if you saw it all, if you experienced it all, you'd probably go crazy. Because you don't bring it all in all the time. You focus, you selectively focus. So sometimes you might just see this thing here. And sometimes you just notice this one. And sometimes you just notice this one, and sometimes you just notice this one. I don't know what you see. You might see that one and not that one. You might be aware of that and not of that. What I want to suggest is that you've got these senses, this lens. Somebody said it right off. This lens, which includes your touch and your smell and your hearing and your taste and your sight. Those are your senses, right? Now, what I'm thinking is that there's no way to get anything from out here into here except through those senses, except through this lens, which is your five senses. And that you don't sense everything at one time. It's selective. Okay, we'll sense that, we'll sense that, we'll sense that, we'll sense that, we'll sense that. But all that other stuff that's out there, you don't even know about. For example, if you have a thought, unfriendly, I claim that because of this thought, you color the lens. You know how in physics, if you have a green lens, then you either see everything green or you can't let green light through? You know about that? That's a selective perception. I'm saying that your thoughts are what color the lens. And so if you have that thought called unfriendly, what you see is all the unfriendly stuff. And you selectively perceive out the friendly stuff in the world. Or maybe you have a thought called unsafe. You know the world's unsafe. You know, these days the world's just not safe. You know, people have those thoughts. What I'm claiming is that if you have that thought, then what you do is you see all the stuff that's unsafe. That's what you perceive. And therefore, you really do create it all that way. And there's one more part of this, is that this bag of skin that you operate in, it's got feet. Now, the problem with the feet is that they can carry you to places that prove that you're right. So these feet take you to different parts of the universe, the world, the community, the college. And so you only play in certain parts of here. Your feet, some of your feet never take you down here, or up here, or over here. You just never choose your feet to go there. If you got unsafe, well, you can prove that you're right about unsafe by having your feet take you to places that are not very safe. Or that are unfriendly, well, just hang around unfriendly places. There are certainly out in this universe a lot of unfriendly places. Or even how you walk down. You ever watch somebody walk down the street? You know, they walk down the street, some people who have a thought that the street's unfriendly, they walk down the street like this. Like that. Just. And then they get done walking down the street, and they'll say, you know, nobody ever says hello to you. This is such an unfriendly place. Nobody ever says hello. Well, can you imagine why?
Even that evidence is still somewhat theoretical and abstract. What's useful is when we apply it in our own lives. Now watch as Dave works with some students who are trying on the stand of You Create It All.
The key to the effectiveness of this technique, of this tool, is when you apply it. What I'm going to ask you to do now is to actually think about a time in your life when this tool could be used. And I want to start this exercise of application by asking you to think of a time when you felt like you were the victim. And actually get into that and write about how you were the victim. Because sometimes you are. I mean, things just happen. It didn't have anything to do with you, it just happened. So would you begin to think about, or if you've got one, write about the details and something that didn't turn out the way you wanted it to. And write about how you were the victim of it. As you watch this on videotape, I'm also asking that while these students are writing, that you begin to think and write about examples where you feel that you are the victim. And play it up some. In other words, really look for who's to blame. Who's out there that created that besides you? Thank you. Now that I know that you're still writing and some of you are continuing to think about this, but I'd like to hear from you. In other words, I want some examples of something that's happened in your life that you're not wild about and how you're really the victim. How it's somebody else's fault, how you didn't have anything to do with it. And I even want you to kind of play that up a bit. So how are you the victim?
I make plans for the weekends with my husband, and then it never seems to work out that we do anything that I had planned. We do things that he wants to do, or I end up not doing anything that I wanted to do at all.
Okay, so you're just the victim of his decisions.
Yeah.
Of what he wants.
Yeah. This last class that I took, I had a partner, and we were supposed to present, it was a marketing class. So we were supposed to take a real-life business and analyze it and see if it could make a profit or see if it could stay in business, a profitable business. And we got a poor grade on our presentation. And I really worked hard on it, and I was disappointed that I didn't get the grade that I wanted. And, you know, I think it was my partner's fault.
Because he didn't carry his end of the weight.
Yeah.
Well, my example is that I'm a music major in school, and something that I've always wanted to do is go into the performing part of music. you have to know the right people to get into the music business, and it's really difficult if you don't know the right people, and it makes it a lot harder.
So you're the victim of not having connections.
Right.
Okay, well, one situation where I saw myself as a victim was when I contacted a college to find out about getting financial aid. And nobody seemed to know anything at all. They kept moving me around to different departments, having me talk to different people, and I never did get my question answered.
Okay, it's a good example because a lot of time we don't know and we don't get the answer, we get the runaround.
My example, which is very recent and fresh in my mind, is talking with a good friend, having what I thought was a very personal conversation that went on to someone else. And I was hurt in the process. By the time it reached the other person, it had been distorted. And when it came back to me, there was anger involved with it and hurt.
Yeah, and so you really were the victim of a betraying friend.
I'm a victim of a attendance criteria in a class. My grade was marked down 2 letter grades because of poor attendance, strictly because of a disagreement in class with the teacher.
So she applied the attendance criteria different to you than to the other students?
Right, because we didn't get along in the classroom.
Okay, so your grade is the victim. The grade you got is the victim of an instructor who's unfair.
Exactly.
All right, thank you. Now, I appreciate that you would share those details. I mean, you really talked about those particular problems of how you were the victim of it. And now what I want you to do is to take that same example that you just wrote about, that you just spoke about, and pretend that you created all. But I'm asking you now to actually write down how you created it and answer that question of, well, what did I do to do that? So would you now start writing about that? This is harder. This is harder work. And while they're doing that hard work, I ask that as you watch this tape, you do that rigorous thinking or that difficult writing, which is the time when you take whatever problem that you examined earlier and flip the victim. Flip it around so you look at how you created it. I appreciate your writing, and I know that you're continuing to write and continuing to think, and I'd like, though, that you stop and actually, even though you haven't fully explained how you created it all, I'm asking that you now show me how you flipped the victim, how you've started off being the victim, and now how you see that maybe you actually had some role in it.
I can see how I actually create this situation because I don't tell my husband what I intend to do on the weekend. I don't tell him what my plans are.
So then he just makes his, and he's uninformed about you. All right? So that's one way. You don't communicate your plans. What else do you do to create the problem?
When he tells me what he has planned, I don't interrupt or let him finish and then just stop and say, well, I don't want to do that.
So
I don't even tell him that I don't like his plan. I can see how I set up the situation with the marketing class. I relied on my partner to do some work without setting up enough time to be with him, to work on it together. We worked apart a lot.
Okay, so if you would have worked more together, then it might have been more successful. All right, so that's one way. What's another way?
I think I didn't communicate to him exactly what I expected.
Okay, with my major in music, I guess I could apply myself more. If I want to get into the business that badly, I could push myself and make it a little harder for them to refuse.
Okay, great. So one way to actually develop what you want, even though you don't have connections, would be to be more assertive and more, your words, pushy even.
Yeah, persistent.
Persistent, good. That's a great word. So that's one way that you actually create not having the connections. How else do you do it?
Well, my attitude kind of, I'm very dependent. I don't like to, have to wait around or anything. I like to get what I want right then, and that's another thing about me. I have no patience.
Well, when I called the college, probably I should have stated my question more clearly. told them exactly what I was looking for.
So when you didn't get the answer to your question about financial aid, you say that one of the ways you created not getting the answer is you didn't ask the question clearly. Okay, what's another way?
Or I could have asked them what department I needed to talk to, so that they wouldn't just keep moving me without my knowing where.
Yeah, that's a great idea, which is to go in and when you're looking for an answer to a question, instead of asking the question, you ask the person where you could get the answer to the question. Great idea.
The way that I created the problem with the conversation with my friend that was passed on is I assumed that he would keep that conversation between the two of us. I was wrong in assuming that.
In other words,
I didn't communicate properly so that he would know. He didn't know. I mean, I never said to him, please don't tell anyone this.
Okay, so you didn't really make it clear to him. I mean, you kind of assumed that he would know. I mean, any normal, intelligent human being would know to keep that confident.
And he didn't. He didn't have a clue. I mean, I asked him later, and he said, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to tell anyone. I didn't know that it was important to you or private to you.
Right, right. And so that message, you could have sent that message. In a way, by not sending it, you created the confidence being shared.
I could see how it might have created a problem in the classroom because I disrupted her class. I disrupted her train of thought, and I didn't have to do that. I could have disagreed with her and told her about it in private, or just being a little more subtle about my way of expressing myself in class.
The way you behaved in class essentially created part of the problem. What else did you do to create the problem?
Well, with the work, I could have told my job that the class was a little more important than the work, because I didn't need the money, I wanted the money, and I'd already missed several other classes because of sports.
So you were in charge of whether or not you worked. You didn't have to work, and you didn't have to work at those times.
Right.
Okay, what else did you do to create the problem?
Nothing, all the rest was her fault.
You've just watched students experimenting with the tool you created all. We invite you to experiment with this tool in your own life, to look for situations where you can ask, how did I do that? What did I do to create that? What was my role in this situation? We're not saying that feeling like a victim is wrong. We're offering an alternative. We're offering an opportunity to try on You Create It All.